Thank you, Madam Chair. We are live.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular Electoral Area Services Committee for July 7th, 2021. I'd like to first acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and with that, I turn to approval of the agenda with a deletion of R12 to move to the July 21st Electoral Area Services. Moved. Is there a seconder? Second. All in favor? Opposed, if any, motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes. Ms. Harrison.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. There is also the addition of 2 supplemental items related to R2.
Thank you so much, that we received by email the other day. Thank you. I did forget about that. Yes. So with that, okay, we need to vote again, or we can take that. We need to vote again. We can just take that because we did vote.
No, Madam Chair, you did not. You need to vote with those, with the addition
with those
and the deletion.
Okay, is there a mover? Moved by Director Kuhn, second by Director Salmon. All in favor? Opposed, if any, motion's carried. Go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is adoption of minutes. Item M1 is the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of June 16th, 2021. And the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of June 16th, 2021 be adopted.
Thank you. It's been moved. Second. All in favor? Opposed, if any, motion is carried. Thank you. Any business arising?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is none.
Turn then to public input period.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is none.
We turn to correspondence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item C1 is a grant and aid request from Electoral Area E for the Cowichan Watershed Board, and the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area E Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, in the amount of $500 be provided to Cowichan Watershed Board to support the Cowichan Stewardships Roundtable's coordination of the community celebration of our rivers. Watson River Day on September 25th, 2021.
There a mover? Moved. Seconder? Been moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Smith. And Director Smith, you have a question?
Yes. Is this correct saying the Cowichan Watershed Board? Should it not be the Cowichan Watershed Society? Then how does the board receive money when I'm confused how the board can receive money?
Ms. Harrison?
And does that board not receive financial funding from the CVRD within another function? So I know I remember going back with grant and aids, and that if there was some sort of connection between the CVRD and a specific group that received funding, then a grant and aid wasn't part of it. So maybe we can have some clarification from staff. So thank you.
Ms. Weiner, welcome.
Through the chair to Director Smith, you are correct. When there is a function that's already in a place that's being funded by the CVRD, we cannot fund funds that we'd normally put through to a function. This is for an event. It sometimes has the same society does events as well as they actually do the work towards a function. They can be sometimes multiple things. So in this case, it's a permissible because this is going towards an event and it's outside the realm of what the service provides.
Thank you for that clarification.
Just follow up. Yes.
Go ahead.
How can it be the Cowichan Watershed Board?
Through the chair to Director Smith, I think that's the name of the organization, but I will double check before we make the payment out on that.
Do we have people in this table that sit on the Cowichan Watershed Board?
Yes, we do, because I sit. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
The Cowichan Watershed Board doesn't handle any money. It all goes through their society. So whether it says Cowichan Watershed Board or society, it's going to the same place.
Okay, are we any clearer now? Ms. Weiner?
I've just looked it up, and the name of the group is called the Cowichan Watershed Board. It's not the actual board of the which is the representatives on there. It's actually the name of the organization.
Okay. All right, I see a head shaking, but it has been moved and seconded, I believe, Ms. Harrison. Been duly moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to C2, Ms. Harrison.
Madam Chair, just a point of order. Text from Director Nicholson. Please ask Kathleen to let me in. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. She's having a problem getting in?
Yeah.
Oh, there she is. Okay, great. All righty, we move on now to C2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item C2 is a letter dated June 14th, 2021 from Brian Bedford, Executive Director, Local Government Infrastructure and Finance, Ministry of Municipal Affairs, Reinvesting in Canada Infrastructure Programs, ICIP, for COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream Project number IV0174, Thetis Island Public Wharf Refurbishment Project, and it's for information.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Smith, you'd like to speak to that? You have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make a recommendation. I'd like to recommend that it be recommended to the board that a meeting be scheduled with the Thetis Island Port Commission to review options for the Thetis Island Wharf refurbishment due to the unsuccessful grant funding application to the COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream Program for this project.
Right, that's been moved. Is there a seconder? Been moved and seconded.
Excuse
Director
me,
Smith,
can
do
you
need
say
to
that
speak more?
again?
Would you like to
kindly
read your
repeat
resolution?
the motion, or could you, it would have been nice to have it. Thanks.
I do apologize. I did send it to the chair and legislative services. I'll read it again. That it be recommended to the board that a meeting be scheduled with the Thetis Island Port Commission to review options for the Thetis Island Wharf refurbishment due to the unsuccessful grant funding application to the COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream Program for this project.
So that has been moved and seconded. And Director Acton, go ahead.
Thank you. Perhaps Director Smith could just remind us about this whole motion. I remember this coming to the board, or coming to us as a committee, and how it's funded and who does all the management for that. Could you just give us a little bit of history here?
Thank you. Director Smith, can you just give a brief overview on this to remind us?
The Thetis Island Wharf is a function that has a budget of $490. It's funded by Thetis Island taxpayers and also Hudson Island taxpayers. In, I believe, February, we, the board authorized a grant application for $275,000 for the refurbishment of the wharf. Currently, the emergency vehicles cannot go on the wharf to transport patients needing water taxi with paramedics off the island. And that's part of this whole refurbishment and the grant. And as you can read in the letter, the application and the grant was oversubscribed. And for us to look at the funding, it needs to go back to the Thetis Island Commission, that's a CVRD commission, for them to look at funding options. And that's what
Thank
this
you.
is giving them the authorization to do. Thank you.
Director Morrison, go ahead.
So I'm a little confused by the resolution. So it says the Thetis Island Wharf folks, and I guess they're a commission, and they can certainly call a meeting at any time that they would like. But what are we recommending to the board? That who meets with them? Are we saying that Mr. Farquhar should be meeting with them, or staff meet with them? It wasn't clear in the resolution, and I would think that, oh, there's Mr. Farquhar. I would think that Mr. Farquhar, being the diligent employee that he is probably well down the road to making those arrangements. So
Welcome, Mr. Farquhar.
yeah, could you fill us in on where you're at with this and whether or not this is a resolution that's required?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, through to Director Morrison, this resolution is required as part of our due process. It is something that we've advised the area director would be most appropriate in terms of moving this matter forward to provide the Port Commission the opportunity to further review options that have been previously presented and advise back to the board what they think as the Port Commission would be an appropriate avenue moving forward in light of the unsuccessful grant application. So staff are supportive of this and would be working with the commission to set up a meeting if so directed by the board.
Thank you. Director Smith?
Just for some clarification, we all have APCs and we all have parks commissions. And I am fortunate to also have a Thetis Island Wharf Commission that's under the CVRD by bylaw. So that's maybe a little bit more clarification as to why it needs to be referred to this group. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we have all the information. It has been duly moved and seconded. Going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Not sure if we had some opposition. I think that was just a delay. And Director Nicholson, you were in favor? Okay, thank you. Moving on now to information, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item IN1 has two parts. The first part is the Electoral Area E Cowichan Station Satlam Glenora Advisory Planning Commission minutes of June 8th, 2021. And part two is the electoral areas A, Mill Bay Malahat, B, Shawnigan Lake, and C, Cobble Hill Joint Advisory Planning Commission meeting minutes of June 24th, 2021, and those are for information.
I don't see anybody with questions on that, and that is for information. We move on now to reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R1 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DVP 21B02 for 1603 Wilmot Avenue, PID 017397839. And I have someone in the lobby that I'm not sure is the applicant. I just need to verify that with staff.
Sure.
Is there a Steve related to this?
Yes.
Chloe, can you hear me?
Thank you. I believe the applicant is Victoria Robson.
She's the agent, right?
Steve at ShawniganAlliance.org. He is the Shawnigan Alliance Church. Maybe he's the applicant.
Steve at Shawnigan Alliance Church.
That's probably right. That's correct.
Yes, Steve Vaughn.
Okay, so I will admit him from the
Thank
lobby,
you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Students.
Welcome,
Thank
welcome,
you.
Mr. Limshu, and welcome, Steve.
And Victoria.
That's, oh, Steve and Victoria. There we go. Now we got it all together.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Could you press mute while we hear the application, and then we'll come back to you when staff is done. So just press mute and stay on the screen. Don't go away, and listen to the presentation. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Limshu and Ms. Boyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Or Ms. Boyle.
I'll be running the PowerPoint and Ms. Boyle will be giving the presentation. So I'm just going to
Great.
share my screen.
Sure.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Perfect. And can everyone hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Perfect. So I'm presenting the application DVP 21B02, the development variance permit application for 1603 Wilmot Road, which is the site of Shawnigan Alliance Church. So this is an institutional property located within the Shawnigan Village. Oh, thanks, Frank. The property fronts both Wilmot Avenue and Shawnigan Mill Bay Road. The primary entrance is off of Wilmot Avenue for vehicles and pedestrians. The rear of the property on Shawnigan Mill Bay Road is steeper down to the road, and there's a more informal pedestrian access located at the rear. Currently, one existing freestanding sign is located in front of the church, and that sign is facing Wilmot Road. The applicant is requesting a variance to the sign bylaw to allow for one additional oversized identification sign on the northeastern portion of the parcel, and this sign would face Shawnigan Mill Bay Road. The proposed sign
Name this.
is 5.1 square meters with a height of 2.28 meters. The proposed sign will be made of wood backing with black lettering surrounded by a wooden structure. No sign illumination is proposed. Typically, institutional and residential properties only front one road with one primary access. However, the subject property actually fronts two roads. So while the primary vehicle access is off of Wilmot Road, there is an informal access off of Shawnigan Mill Bay Road. So the sign wouldn't compete nor interfere with the existing identification sign. Shawnigan Mill Bay Road is also a heavily trafficked road, and the sign has been developed to be visible to both vehicles and pedestrians. The sign is set back at a distance of 6.7 meters from the parcel line and will be located at an elevation so higher than the road. So currently, development services are of the opinion that the variance is reasonable given the location and the intent of the sign. So we can go to the recommendation. So we're recommending that it be recommended to the board that development variance permit number DVP 21B02 for 1603 Wilmot Avenue for PAD 017397839 be issued.
So moved.
I just wondered if Victoria and Steve wanted to add anything else.
Hi, I'm Victoria.
Hi.
Thanks for meeting with us today and looking at this. The only other thing I wanted to mention was I think in the write-up that was provided, and I assume that each of you have that, is that the lettering would be on a white background, but we are just, I think that was just maybe my oversight, but it's just going to be cedar planks So it'd be very natural looking with cedar horizontal planks going across, and then just the black lettering with a little bit of the logo that you see there. So it'll be more
Okay.
fitting to the natural look of the area and the trees and whatnot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Director Acton, do you wish to speak to it? It's already been moved and seconded. Go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you. I would just like to say that I agree with staff and the applicant. I thank the applicant for all their community service. Actually, they're a real asset to the community in many ways, more than just church service, but they offer open child play groups and so many and outreach to the community and the vulnerable. So I really appreciate that. And it totally makes sense to have that sign on the Shawnigan Lake Road side, since they are very residential on the other side. They're not going to hit any traffic going by. So I completely support it. And I think the size is appropriate for how busy the road is. And I'm really happy to hear that there's cedar planks, because that's not how I've read it. So it sounds perfect. And yeah, I support the application. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Director Salmon, did you need to speak to this as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, I go by the church all the time, every day pretty well, and I echo Director Acton's comments about the community aspect. And as far as the sign, glad to hear, yeah, the cedar plank. I was a little asterisk when it was the white painted background, but I was actually just curious from Ms. Boyle, what are there forming character, our sign bylaw, does it encourage natural finishes, etc.?
So
Ms. Boyle?
thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Director Salmon. The development permit area guidelines don't actually apply to institutional zone properties or institutional uses. The development permit area guidelines apply to residential, commercial, and industrial development. So it's just really the sign bylaw, though the sign guidelines within the development permit area are a really helpful tool for kind of evaluating if a variance would be supported by the CBRD.
So follow up. So
Follow up, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's even more important. I'm glad the applicants are going to try to do the natural look, especially in keeping with the bakery and the little businesses just down the road, which have, I know, nice natural signs generally. So thank you.
I call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you very much for coming today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very much appreciate it.
R2?
Okay, I guess we.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R2 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DVP 21I01 for Lot 55, Creekside Drive, PID 026-254-026. And the applicant, Wesley Mars, is in the lobby. Shall I admit him?
Yes, please. Is this also you, Ms. Boyle? Welcome, applicant. If you can hear us, we are starting your presentation. Is it Wesley? Wesley, are you there? Wesley, if you are there, could you press your microphone onto mute while the presentation is going on? Welcome, Wesley. If you could just press mute until the application.
Yeah, did I do it?
Yeah.
Good luck, man. Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Limshu or Ms. Boyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to share my screen once again.
Okay. Thank you. So I am presenting again, this time on application number DVP 21I01, which is a development variance permit for lot 55 Creekside Drive. Next slide. So this property fronts Cowichan Lake to the south, and it's accessed off of Creekside Drive to the north. The property was part of a subdivision along the lakefront of similar sized properties, and a riparian areas regulation assessment report was conducted in 2006 as part of the subdivision process. The 2006 report established the 50-meter streamside protection and enhancement area from the natural boundary of Cowichan Lake at that time, and a covenant was registered to protect the SPIA. Creekside Drive was established at that time as a road right-of-way along the northern portion of the properties. During the subdivision process, the properties were cleared of vegetation outside the established SPIAs, in line with, consistent with the riparian areas regulation assessment report at that time. No vegetation removal occurred within the established SPIA and covenanted areas during the subdivision process. So next slide. The applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the watercourse setback from 15 meters to 13.3 meters to allow for the construction of a deck attached to a single family dwelling. The deck is located within the 15 meters of the established 164 meter high watermark contour of Cowichan Lake. So note that this is beyond 15 meters from the natural boundary of Cowichan Lake and also outside of the covenanted area established at the time of the subdivision. The zoning bylaw and development permit area currently measure the SPIA from the established high water mark and not the natural boundary. The proposed development has an approved wrapper assessment report or riparian areas protection regulation assessment report, which demonstrated that the property was subject to undue hardship. The qualified environmental professional has worked with the applicant to adjust the original building plans, which encroached further into the setback area, so that now the deck only encroaches 1.7 meters into the 15-meter setback. The riparian areas protection regulation assessment report also notes that the property is highly constrained, with the road right-of-way and the entire property being within the 30-meter assessment area. The deck and the single-family dwelling, the single-family dwelling are still located. The majority of the single-family dwelling is still located entirely out of the 15-meter setback area, and the deck is still located outside of the covenanted area. No vegetation removal is required, as the entire building is within an area that was previously cleared with subdivision. So it's an area of existing human disturbance. And I believe, yes, and the QEP provided assurance that the development will not result in any harmful alteration, disruption, or destruction of natural features, functions, and conditions in the SPIA that support the life processes of fish, even with the proposed encroachment. Development Services staff consider that the variance request is reasonable and recommend approval and issuance of development variance permit DVP 21I01.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Nicholson. You have a question for staff?
I do. When we have these variance applications, do we not consult with the neighbors on what their thoughts are? I didn't see anything in the report about that.
Ms. Boyle?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Nicholson. So adjacent property owner notices were sent out in accordance with the Local Government Act, and I believe there were 2 responses, and those were supplementals to the application, and they were on the agenda.
Thank you. Director Kuhn?
I move to staff recommendations.
Recommendation has been moved. Is there a seconder? It's been seconded by Director Wilson. And I just asking if the applicant wishes to add anything more. Okay. So is there any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Director Morrison?
Thank you. And I was going to ask a question before the motion was moved, but in regards to input from a neighbor, and I guess this would be through to the applicant. The one neighbor has indicated that there have been trees removed in the streamside protection enhancement area, or cut down in the, it says noted in the letter that previously hired a tree service to cut down trees in the riparian zone. So I'm hoping that isn't the case unless there's been indication of danger tree, and that's been noted by a environmental professional through to the
Wesley?
applicant.
Microphone? Take your microphone off. You're muted.
Okay, so
There you go.
the question of that is, I brought a person out to take down trees within the building envelope. When the tree faller was there, he expressed that there was a maple tree that was 40 feet tall and then branched out into a stem. And he said that it's a danger tree because it grew out of two trees, and he said it should be removed. And I said, okay, well, if you feel it should be removed, then it's fine, remove it. That tree then turned out to be within 6 feet inside of that streamside protection area. I was then contacted later on by Ian McDonald at that point in time about the tree being removed. I expressed that I was unaware of the fact that, you know, the procedure to do it, I should have had the danger tree report filed prior to removing that maple tree, but it was recommended that it should be removed by the faller. I then had a letter sent to the CVRD expressing that the tree was a danger tree and it should have been removed. So yes, I did proceed and not follow the proper chain of what we'll say, you know, following the steps to do it. I should have filed the report prior to removing the tree. I just followed the advice of a tree faller, and that's why it was done. You know, as also too, on top of these trees though, I've also now I had to get a tree report filed for trees that I don't even want to remove out of it. And part that I find extremely funny is that there is a tree that is leaning significantly to my neighbor's property, and it's a large arbutus tree. I asked to have that removed. The arborist said that the tree is healthy and we're going to take one side of the tree off and take it off. At the end of the day, when that tree goes down, it will crush that house, but I'm leaving that tree there. So I don't know what else I'm supposed to say. So, but yes, I don't know if that answers all the question.
Thank you so much. You can mute your microphone again. Thanks, Wesley. Is
Okay.
there any other questions for staff or the applicant? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. That will go to the next board. Thank you. Moving on now to R3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R3 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DP 20B 22 for 2684 Courtney Way, PID 025-423-045. And I will admit the applicant from the lobby. It's Karen Gobbin.
Welcome, Karen, if you're in here. Welcome, Karen. And go ahead, Ms. Herrera. It looks like you'll be presenting. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to be sharing my screen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so this application is development permit application number DP20B22 for the property at 2684 Courtney Way. The property is within the Shawnigan Village Development Permit area, and therefore a development permit is required for subdivision. The applicant is requesting a 3-lot subdivision, which I think is on the next slide, and all the lots will be connected to a community water system. So I'm just going to leave it there and ask if the committee has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I turn to the committee. If you could take your screen, thank you. Any questions? Director Acton?
Hi there.
Director
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, well, first it kind of starts with a comment. So as for a community perspective, we are as a community, really stressed about development that's happening where all the trees just get cut down and cleared. And I understand we don't have a tree bylaw, which we could have. And I understand there's some wording in the DP that says, like, you know, trees that are, you know, I'm just reiterating, but trees that are necessary, or, you know, something along those, staff can correct me. But is there something that, especially for that heavily treated area and along the road, it's really problematic and it's not what the community wants to see. And it's really happening a lot on Shawnigan Lake Road and Mill Bay Road, and then and along our throughfares. So is there something that we can, do we understand what trees are coming down? Can we ask for that plan? Or can we request that only 30% of the trees are removed? Or is there something we can do to strengthen that?
Ms. Herrera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a tricky situation with tree removal. As I believe the committee is aware, the only time trees are really protected is in riparian areas. And my understanding with the development permit area guidelines when it comes to trees is, unless it's really directly related to something like stormwater management, then we really shouldn't be defining areas of tree retention for sort of no reason, I guess. The reason would be potentially stormwater retention. However, I mean, having talked to the applicant on this property, I think what they've proposed and they've shown sort of where their septic systems are going and ideal locations of dwellings has been because of their desire to retain trees as much as possible and work with the topography. Again, when properties change hands, it's hard to know exactly what will occur, but that is the situation with every single subdivision we deal with.
Ms. Govan, would you like to add anything?
No, I mean, we've lived on this property for 18 years and are quite attached to it and all the mature trees on it. So we're doing anything that we can in terms of the develop with care aspect to retain certainly the mature stands. Ms. Acton, I absolutely agree with you. Seeing large swaths of sort of forest being clear cut for development, I don't think isn't what the community likes to see either, and that's not what our intent is. But I guess the point is, if and when we should sell any of the new lots, short of maybe putting a new covenant on it to protect certain trees, I don't think that there's anything that we could do to prevent a new owner from cutting down certain trees. Certainly not our desire.
Thank you. Director Acton, follow up?
Well, so yeah, I guess that's then it's going to happen because developers come along and say, well, we can't build, to make it easier, we need to just clear the lot. And I haven't seen too much development that's being done thoughtfully in that regard. So you mentioned that we can look at stormwater management. If there's a ditch that's running along there, then we want to prevent soil erosion from going into our seasonal ditches. And so is there a buffer that we can look at from the road? Or, I think perhaps Mr. Limchi, I feel like leaving it up to the developer is, I know it's only a small example, but they all add up.
That's a good question for Ms. Herrera, or I don't know if it can.
I'm not sure I really have much more to add. Sorry, maybe Frank Lumshow does.
Okay,
Sure.
I have, go ahead.
Yep. So, Madam Chair, through to Director Acton. Yeah. So as Mr. Rep indicated previously, we have development permit guidelines that speak to certain issues with respect to development of lands, and so, we certainly try to work with the individual applicants to develop their lands appropriately and protect areas that are whether it's for protecting riparian areas or slope stability or those sorts of things. But the fact that remains that we do not actually have a tree cutting bylaw, and we don't have any additional policies or regulatory instruments to regulate tree cutting. So, we work with the applicants given the tools that are available to us at present. Certainly if that changes in the future, we'll certainly work with the applicants to enforce the rules and regulations that are in play at that point in time. But it's very difficult to regulate tree cutting. Once the lands have been subdivided and sold to individuals, because the fact of the matter is that the future purchaser will most likely like to develop the lands as they see fit, provided that they're not circumventing or breaking any rules or regulations that are in place, or violating any covenants that are placed on the property at that point in time.
Director Nicholson.
What would we need
Go
to
ahead,
do?
Director Nicholson, Salmon, then Morrison. Thank you.
This is a question for staff. What would we need to do to consider putting as a regular business way of doing business, putting covenants on pieces of when land is subdivided on pieces of forests that are there? I mean, I think it should be a standard practice if that's the only tool we have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. So right now, the Local Government Act gives us the authority to establish development permit guidelines for certain things. And certainly through those tools, we're able to protect certain areas from any sort of impact for development. The protection of trees it's very complicated, and it gets more complicated the smaller the parcels are, because while you may think that it's great to protect the stand of trees today, if you do any sort of harvesting, for example, if you were to clear the site for your building lot, you may actually be creating a hazard for the developer at the end of the day, because if you take a chunk of a group of trees out of a stand, it could potentially affect the integrity of the surrounding trees, and so all of a sudden you get into a situation where the first storm that comes along, trees are falling left, right, and center. And so it's not, in my experience in dealing with land development, it's not as clean and clear cut. I guess I shouldn't use the term clear cut, but it's not as clean as one would think when it's, to simply say, well, we'll protect this stand, we'll take those down. It does require a bit of thought and evaluation when you're dealing with that.
Thank you. I think I have Mr. Tippett. Would you like to add anything? Welcome, Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would just like to add the question of a covenant came up, and if it's a non-discretionary approval, so just a regular development permit, all that the applicant has to do is conform to the guidelines. If the guidelines don't specify a covenant, we're sort of overreaching our authority by saying we should have a covenant, even though in theory, it's a good idea. So keep that in mind. I guess the other thing is just about tree cutting permits. There is a way to do tree cutting bylaws in regional districts. it's different than municipal bylaws. It has to be linked, the removal of trees and the existence of bylaw has to be linked to the existence of a natural hazard in the event the trees are removed. And they mentioned flooding, erosion, landslip, and avalanche. And so you have to have a technical basis for creating the bylaw. There has to be an actual active immediate hazard related to that before the bylaw can be actually legally adopted. And so that limitation really makes preservation of tree stands, even if you do have a bylaw like that, very, very difficult, because it doesn't deal with aesthetic reasons or just forest function reasons. It deals with natural hazards to human use of the land. So I thought I would just add that. I hope that helped. Thank you.
Director Nicholson. I have Nicholson, Salmon, and Morrison. Go ahead, Director Nicholson. This is a follow-up for you.
Yeah, I actually think this is a very serious issue because we've all lived through this heat wave. Trees are one of the easiest ways we can help mitigate heat waves. And they're also really important for biodiversity and so forth. And I am convinced that it might take a bit of work, but I am convinced that we could identify stands that are particularly important to protect and use covenants to do so if we wanted to. But if that requires, what I'm hearing from Mr. Tippett is that requires us changing that particular development permit area guideline. Is that what I understand?
Madam Chair, yes, I mean, I'm sorry, I haven't reviewed this file in detail, but I don't believe we have a covenant requirement for that purpose. It's conceivable that if there was a legitimate reason under the development permit designation of the area to try and preserve tree stands related to some of the authorities we're given in the Act, then yes, possibly we could look to doing that. So perhaps that's a matter for modernized OCP consideration. It's a good point.
Thank you. I turn to Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I looked up just for interest. So the guidelines, 11.4.5, landscape, rainwater, and environmental protection. And it does specifically talk about tree canopy cooling, water retention, and wildlife habitat as part of tree retention. So I'm just, I understand some of the difficulties, but it seems to me I have seen development permits which do specifically mention that removal of trees is permitted only where necessary for construction. So to me, well, here's my question. Does it not seem like that should be put in there as a standard encouragement, even if when it comes down to it may be difficult, but to encourage owners to try to retain trees? And if not, why is it in some and not in others? Right, Mr. Limshu.
Go ahead, Mr. Limshu.
I saw Mr. Herrera's hand up, but
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Herrera. Go ahead, Ms.
Thank
Herrera.
you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment on this application in particular and the reason why the trees were not part of this guideline that Director Salmon was mentioning. Essentially, the rainwater or preliminary rainwater management plan that was provided, was designing around rock pits in terms of dealing with the rainwater, as well as some permeable materials for the driveways. And so that sort of met the requirement there in terms of how they would attempt to deal with stormwater. And so trees weren't really part of the equation. And yes, you've probably seen in other subdivisions and development permit applications that has been part of the recommendations, either sometimes through a QEP or through the engineer. So it has come up from time to time, but as I mentioned before, it does need to relate to stormwater management to be a valid requirement of the DP.
Follow up, Director Salmon. I have two more speakers as well. Go ahead, Director Salmon.
Yeah,
follow
thank
up.
you. So just looking for an answer to my original question. Why is tree retention in some development permits specifically and yet not in others?
Yeah, to Mr. Herrera's point, it depends on the development permit and the guidelines that are applicable to that specific site or those specific sites. So in some cases, it might be trees are protected for environmental reasons. There's a riparian area going through the site, as an example. In other cases, it might be the retention of trees are key to ensure the stability of steep slopes or hazardous areas, because those trees are in fact keeping that bank together. And it's the recommendation of the geotechnical engineer or engineering consultant of the day to ensure that there is no vegetation removal to ensure the stability of the bank long term. So it comes down to the specific conditions of a particular piece of property and what development permit guidelines are applicable to those. And depending on the condition, the retention of trees are either protected through the development permit and subsequent covenants, or they're not.
Final comment?
If,
Go
can I
ahead.
just, sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Herrera.
And I can just add to that to say that it also depends on what the professionals are recommending who are providing the supporting materials with the application. Thank you.
Okay, Director Salmon, follow up. Go ahead.
So I'm not concerned about this particular applicant, but I do think in general that if we can encourage that, and we do have the guideline that we could put it in there as kind of a default, and that just, sure, they can argue back if there seems to be a danger tree or whatever, but I think we want to encourage that kind of tree retention for both ecological and just the public aesthetic.
And that is something we could look at in our OCP and talking about it then. Director Morrison.
I wish I had $1 for every time we talked about tree cutting bylaws in this regional district. Then it essentially boils down to if it's an aesthetic or at this point a climate change mitigation measure. We still haven't figured out a way in all the time I've been here to get a tree cutting bylaw that's going to have any force and effect. And the bottom line is somebody moves here, and I'm going to pick on Albertans. Somebody moves here from Alberta who's used to flat land and no trees and wants his lot to be flat land and no trees. He's going to cut down all the trees, and we're not going to go after him because the enforcement costs too much. So, I think we've gone as far as we can on this issue. But to this particular application, forgive me, to the applicant, we did an awful lot of reading over the last weekend with all the material for the last couple of days, and I just can't recall what the rationale for, it could be obvious, but the rationale for only subdividing or creating 3 lots instead of 4, it looks like you've got a 0.6 of a remainder, and is it your intention to at one point subdivide off another lot or 2 in the future?
Yeah, we had initially considered a 4-lot subdivision, and our house is at one end of the property, and our septic field was at the other end of the property. And in the course of determining where the septic field for our house would have to be relocated to, we determined that subdividing 2 lots now was straightforward and made sense, and potentially subdividing that additional lot at a later time. We could consider that after we put the septic field in place and saw what the sort of what the lay of the land was for that 0.6 remainder that we'd be living on. If it's doable in the future, then we'll consider it. But at this point, we need to put a new septic field in an area that might actually be on that extra lot. So that's where we're at with that.
And currently we have this application that we are looking at. So could Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one more question and then I have a comment. But Mr. Lim Chu, if we were to ask you to work with the applicant and come back, would you be able to present something that's a little bit better on the tree part?
I think certainly we can have a discussion with the applicant, as certainly there is nothing I can do to force the issue at this point in time for protecting the trees, as indicated by Mr. Tippett. This is a development permit, and the fact of the matter is, if the applicant is meeting the guidelines under the development permit, they have the ability to move forward with their application. Anything above and beyond that would be at the applicant's call, and basically they would be volunteering to do that. But as far as enforcing it, it'd be very difficult to do that.
Ms. Herrera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is a general requirement in the draft development permit that relates to tree cutting, and it's around the windows for bird nesting. What I was going to suggest is another clause in that general requirements section that would essentially just encourage tree retention and sort of have some soft language around that, which helps to inform future property owners as well, like to think about that before just doing anything. So that would be something we could add that is similar to what was occurring on the development permit for the neighboring lot. The difference there was it was language that was suggested from their environmental professional at the time, and that was inserted into the permit. And it really was just an encouragement. It was not a restriction on tree cutting. So that is possible.
Okay.
So can I follow
up, Director Acton? Okay, go ahead.
So I'd like to have that language added, please. And is there a motion on the floor? Or do you need someone to move it? Okay, so I'll move the motion.
With added wording.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Director Wilson, you did want to speak. Do you still want to speak? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm confused here. Because on the one hand, we've got directors who say, we've got experts on the staff and we rely on their expertise and we should behave there. We've then got other directors saying, well, the staff have done everything they can. They've come forward with a recommendation. They've said over and over again that the applicant has filled out everything he is supposed to. And much as I appreciate the efforts to protect the trees and everything else that goes with it, there is nothing wrong with this application. And at this late stage of the time, to come forward with a detailed discussion that should have been carried out beforehand is just plain wrong. This is unfair on the applicant. They've done everything they are supposed to. And to now come forward and say, I'd like this, that, and the other, and try and change the rules which are in place doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded, and I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. That goes to the next board. Moving on now to R4.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Yes, Director Acton?
Yes. I would like to propose a motion that we ask staff to come back with a report on how we could incorporate a tree bylaw before our harmonized OCP, what that could look like, because this is extremely important to all of our communities, and I'm not sure we can wait until that time. So if I have a seconder to that effect.
It's been moved and seconded. And could you tell me what your motion is again? Repeat the motion.
Well,
do you have it?
Staff
send
come
it
back.
to staff?
I can write it out afterwards. That staff come back with a report. So what, do you want me to come back to this?
No, you just repeat it, because I didn't, because you have a seconder, so I just want to repeat
come back with a report of what it would look like for us to adopt a tree bylaw at this time.
I believe we've had
At
that
least
before.
a preliminary report. Not in my term. I don't.
Okay. So a discussion, it has been moved and seconded. I turn to Director Martman. Go ahead, please. And then Director Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And I really do appreciate the, sorry?
Excuse me. I just, can we let Ms. Govan go? We have voted. Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Director Martman.
Yeah, I really do appreciate where this is coming from and the intent and the importance of this. However, I can't vote in this right now because a couple of things. If this is part of the if this is going to be part of the harmonization, one thing that was really clear when the harmonization process started was about we weren't going to introduce something new that wasn't already in our, that the APCs weighed in and looked at all the different things that were going on. And so I have a very hard time adding this in on top of it. I recognize that it's important, but I do think I would want the community to weigh in and say, what do they think about this as well? So I think it can be included in part of the process, but I don't think we need it as part of the harmonization process. Thank you.
Okay, I turn to Director Morrison and then Director Salmon, and who else do I have to speak on this?
I think you had me in there on the list at one time or
Oh,
another.
sorry, Director Morrison, Director Wilson, Director Nicholson, and Director Salmon. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
So I'm pretty sure that I heard staff say very specifically the circumstances in which we can regulate tree removal. And they're very specific and they're on the books now. And I think I heard staff say very specifically that for aesthetic reasons, we can't do a tree bylaw. So as Director Martman had said, we may wish that this is something that we can do, but I think staff have already given a pretty clear picture of what we can and cannot do, and this is adding another thing to the list that is the last minute. So I won't be supporting this recommendation.
Director Wilson.
I'm not even sure what the recommendation is. I'd like it repeated, please, and then I can speak on it if I could.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a report to see what it would look like if we were to start discussing a tree bylaw. Our lawyer was the one who said we could have one. So
so what's
right
the resolution?
now we don't have one.
But the resolution
is just for staff to come back with a 2-page report of what the process would be and then we can make the decision.
Yeah, okay, I can speak on that. And let's go back to what the CAO and everybody else is saying. We have no staff. We keep going back to staff asking for more and more reports. This is something which has to be done without going into more and more reports. This is a very simple thing. I don't understand why we're changing things around on the fly right now. To be quite honest, I can't support this at all. It's just taken up more and more staff time, as we've been warned against.
Well, I'd also, what goes on in camera, I just want to send a warning out on that as well. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I actually really appreciate this conversation because I think this is a very important issue. And I am wondering, and I also appreciate that we have collectively come to the conclusion that we're not particularly interested in supporting work for staff that isn't included into the modernization process. So I am wondering, and I also don't like the language in this particular resolution because I don't think we want to be focused on a tree retention bylaw because apparently regional districts can't do that very easily. But I do think it would be useful to have a report on the options for strengthening tree retention guidelines, policy, and regulations. So I think that we heard already from Director Salmon pursued the issue of at least having language in there that's encouraging. So that's a guideline. So I think there is more that we could do. And I would like to sort of see a paper that shows us what all the options are. And I think probably the best way to do it is to ask if that could be incorporated as a high priority in the modernization. So we're about to start looking at policy papers for modernization. Maybe there's one that this could be added into the list of policy work that's happening right now. And so that we look at it sooner rather than later, because I agree This issue's been going on for a really long time. It is really important and we should get on to it.
Director Salmon.
Sorry, unmuting difficulties. Yes, I agree with Director Nicholson, and I think if we broadened it a little, and if Director Atkins okay to say not just policy to improve tree retention, as I said before, it is already in the guidelines in some cases. As I said before, it does show up in some development permits, and as we just noted, Ms. Herrera put it back in here as an encouragement. So I certainly think there are some ways forward, and it would be good to have these formalized. So I will be supporting this.
Okay. I don't see anybody else's hands up. Do we need this repeated? Ms. Harrison, do you have this? No? Do you have the recommendation clearly?
In a sense, Madam Chair.
Okay, so maybe we can see if go ahead with it, just to clarify for everybody.
It was moved and seconded that it be recommended to the board that staff report on options for the implementation of a tree cutting bylaw.
Okay, is everybody
So
clear on that?
Friendly amendment with Allison's suggestion is fine.
And what is that amendment? Go ahead, Director Nicholson.
I actually would think we should defeat this, and I think the resolution should be for staff as a high priority in the modernization process to report back on options for strengthening tree retention guidelines, policy, and regulations.
Okay, well, I'm going to call the question on what we...
Yeah, that would be my preferred motion.
We are going to call the question on the resolution that's on the floor currently. Okay?
I think
Director Salmon?
She was asking for a simple, friendly amendment to this rather than a tree bylaw.
No, she was asking for us to defeat this motion, Director Nicholson was. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is defeated. Director Nicholson.
So let me make this motion to read that staff report back as a high priority in the modernization process on options for strengthening tree retention guidelines, policy, and regulations.
So that's been moved. Is there a sec? And there's a seconder. Okay, so now we're speaking about that. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on that? Director Kuhn and then Director Wilson.
I don't know. I have the impression we're walking in circles here. So now we're trying to enforce, or we're trying to arrange a bylaw that'll prevent trees to be cut. On the other hand, we're worried about wildfires and about having no trees around houses because it's dangerous for the population. What do we want?
This was to go into the modernization.
We are surrounded by forests in the Cowichan Valley, and here we're dickering about, oh, we want this tree. We don't want to have this tree cut. My God, where are we trying to go here?
Director Wilson.
Yeah, I think Director Kuhn has already said what I was going to say. I can't believe what we're talking about here.
Okay, so I will call the question. Could you repeat it, Ms. Harrison, if you did catch it? Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In a sense, the recommendation before you is that the staff report as a high priority in the harmonized OCP plan.
Modernization plan.
Tree retention guidelines, policy, and regulations.
Okay, I'm going to call the question if there's no other hands up. Seeing no other hands up, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is defeated. Moving on now to R4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R4 is the report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DP 20B26 for Lot B, 700 Shawnigan Lake Road, PID 030047927, and the applicant, Rachel Sansom, is in the lobby. I'll just admit her.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Sansom. Welcome, Ms. Sansom. We'll go ahead with the presentation and hopefully you can welcome. Okay, if you just stay on mute and we'll carry on. Go ahead, Ms. Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wright will be giving the presentation and I'll be sharing my screen to run the PowerPoint.
Okay, good afternoon. This is for application number DP 20E26. It's Lot B at 700 Shawnigan Lake Road, PID 030047927. Next slide, please. So the parcel is Lot B, found to the right of the screen. It is on the south side of Shawnigan Lake Road and to the east side of the Shawnigan Lake Road and Stebbings Road intersection. It's a vacant parcel. Next slide, please. So this is the sixth phase of the Malahat Center, an industrial complex that's located at 700 Shawnigan Lake Road. The application is to construct 2 new industrial buildings with a total of 13 new units. Each unit will have a ground floor space as well as a second floor mezzanine. Next slide, please. So the proposed buildings will have a similar form and character to the previous phase that was built, finished construction, I believe, in 2020. So there's flat roofs and color blocking will be utilized to reduce the massing. There'll also be decorative stone clad panels to accent the corners on each building as well. And next slide, please. So the development features 66 parking stalls, a walkway around each building that will provide direct access to each unit entrance, an amenity area to the northwest of the building that will include 2 picnic tables, 2 benches, and a bear-proof garbage bin. And in the development permit, it also includes a signage plan to ensure that there's consistency amongst the signage of the units and with the previously built development. And as mentioned previously, the applicant or the agent is here to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for staff or the agent for the application? Seeing none, Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought it was kind of interesting that there's a mention of bicycle parking. I'm not sure who would ride their bike that far to work, but I think more importantly, we could have charging stations, at least 1 or 2 in a complex like that. Are there any plans for a charging station? I did not see it.
Ms. Samson?
I don't believe that currently we have plans for that. I could check with the owners and see if they'd be willing to accommodate.
Follow up, Director Acton.
Thank you. So question to planning, is that something we can request? Since we have parking spots, a certain number of parking spots that are required?
Ms. Wright, can we require that?
Through to the chair to Director Acton, it is not, electrical vehicle charging stations are not within the development permit area guidelines for, that are included for this application. So it would be at the goodwill of the owners to put one in at this, or put in charging stations. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions? Seeing none, Director Acton, the area director for the director for that area, I turn to you. Or I turn to somebody.
Thank
Who's gonna
you.
move this
Sorry.
up.
I'll move the recommendation then. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried, and that goes to the next board. Thank you very much, Ms. Wright. Can we move to R6?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it's
Just a second. Oh, yes, I'm moving along. Sorry, Director Morrison. I am very much past my hour, so I'd like to request a 10-minute break. My apologies. I do kind of get on a roll, so my apologies. 10 minutes. Come back at 3 o'clock. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are live.
Thank you very much, and welcome back. We will resume now with R5. Go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R5 is the report from the Community Planning Division regarding application number RZ21G01 for 10705 Chemainus Road, Saltaire Water System property.
And who will be speaking to this?
Madam Chair,
Welcome,
I
Mr.
will.
Denniston. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Tippett.
Well, I'm awaiting Frank Limshoe to get the slideshow going. Oh, thanks, Frank. Okay, thank you. Perfect. So, I guess to paraphrase the old Pogo comic strip, we could say, I have met the applicant and he is us. We are the applicant in this case. It is our esteemed and beloved colleagues in engineering services who own and have managed this property for the purpose of maintaining the Saltaire water system. It was inherited from an improvement district prior to that. So that's what this is about. It's about this being declared surplus to our needs operationally and being used for an alternative purpose. Thank you, Frank. So the first second slide, I should say, is the aerial photo of the property. You can see it's a somewhat irregular kind of trapezoidal shape, fronts on Chemainus Road. It backs onto what is often in the summertime a cornfield. I'm not sure if the corn's growing there now. I haven't been down there for a bit, but it's got a building on it, which if you go to the next slide, please, Frank. Oh, sorry, that's the zoning slide. Well, anyway, this just shows that the zoning of the property is P2, which is an institutional zone, which is appropriate for its use as a water maintenance facility, building, and occasional meeting spot. So next slide, please, Frank. Okay, here are the two photos of the building. The one on the left side is what you would more or less see from the fence line or just inside the fence line from Chemainus Road looking east. And the other photo on the right is the back side of the property looking back towards the same building. And there's a big Sunny Saltaire sign there, which I guess is now disused. It's a bit of it should be in a museum probably. Anyway, if you go to the next slide, please. I'll just cut to the chase. The property, as I say, is deemed surplus. We have gone through a meeting with the Advisory Planning Commission. The report contains their recommendation. We couldn't see any particular reason why it didn't make sense to move forward with this change because it would be consistent with the surrounding uses as single-family residential type of use. And so this recommendation is what we're proposing, and it has 4 points in it, and I won't necessarily read them unless the chair asks me to. I'll also say that Brian Dennison and Louise Knoedel-Joy probably are on this call as well, so they could maybe fill in some blanks and certainly answer some questions if the committee members have any specific questions about the use of the property and its eventual sale if this goes ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for staff? Director Martman and then Director Smith.
I was waving as well. Laurie, can you put me on the list, please?
Yes, sorry, I missed you. Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Director Martman?
Sorry, I thought you were in charge. I just want to
We can't hear you very well as your microphone needs to,
Where am I? It's like I lost my microphone. Hang on a second. Is that better?
I'll go to direct. Yep, there we go. Yep.
Okay, sorry, I lost my microphone on my headset. Anyways, through the staff, I'm interested in your comments about the size of this since it's under the minimum acreage or lot size.
Madam Chair, yes, it's under the size that we presently require when subdividing land to use it in the R2 zone. However, there is a clause in every zoning bylaw actually that states that parcels that are undersized that were created under a previous planning regime are permitted to be occupied and used for the use intended. I believe my engineering colleagues indicated that some time ago there was some investigation of the potential for installing a septic field on the site, but that was never done. But considering the surrounding neighborhood, it's not out of character with those sizes, and I would expect it could probably be used safely for a residential purpose. And maybe Brian might have something to add to that.
Excuse me. Yes, the only comment I might add is just to say that Island Health will almost always approve a septic field. You may have to go to an engineered field or something of that nature. There may be some bells and whistles required, but they'll approve it for the intended purposes for a single family dwelling. That would not be an issue.
Okay, thank you. I turn to Director Smith.
Thank you. Through to staff, I have one question, but I'd also like to advise Mr. Tippett that the cornfield is growing nicely right behind it, and the deer are there on a regular basis. So if this moves forward, there will be someone with a very lovely lot, and it'll also bring additional funds into the Saltaire water system. As most of you have heard, we are needing at least 3.7 million for our filtration system, and we are working on a $4.5 million distribution upgrade for a portion of our aging old pipes. These funds will be moved into that, and we'll be able to move forward on some of those projects. I just wanted to ask if it might be appropriate to waive the public hearing as it will be rezoned to residential, which is the lowest impact zoning and consistent with the surrounding properties. It might be a different story if we were proposing a commercial or other zoning. And I just wanted to know if that was a possibility.
Madam Chair, with your permission, the complication, Director Smith, is that this is not only a a zoning bylaw amendment, but it's also an official community plan amendment. And so in other words, the property is designated institutionally in the OCP as well. And we're not permitted to waive public hearings where an OCP amendment's involved, which is why I didn't list it as an option. I hear what you're saying, and in principle, I would agree, but the legislation doesn't allow for us to do that in this case.
Then I have Director Wilson, and then I'll turn to the director of the area after that. Director Wilson, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Director Smith has already indicated where the funds would be going. I was hoping we'd get some as well, but thank you for that.
All righty, I turn to Director Smith.
I move the recommendation.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on now to R6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R6 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding application number 03H-16 RS for PID 008903603 Schnitzer Steel, and I will admit the applicant, who is Nurs Kara. to the meeting.
Welcome. Nurse Kara. And go ahead, Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank, can you start with the slides, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So next one, please. So this is the site. I think you're all familiar with it if you've driven up the Island Highway north of Ladysmith. It's a steel and metal recycling facility on Simpson Road, which is a frontage road just south of the Nanaimo Airport. Next slide, please. It is in the I-1 zone as shown on the subject property map. And if we can go to the next slide. Okay, thanks. So before I get into describing what you're seeing in these photos, I just wanted to point out what stage we're at in this process. I guess we'll get onto that in the next slide, but really this particular item on today's agenda is dealing with a request by the applicant for the board to dispense with its precondition of requiring agreement on a covenant for this site before going to a public hearing. So that's what it's about. Now, what I was going to quickly point out in these two photos is there's a motor vehicle dismantling and scrapping operation involved here. And you can see on, I think, both of these slides, there are now hard surfaces on the site. So if you go to the next slide, Frank, I will sort of recapitulate. Oops, other way. There we go. Oh, there's a recapitulation slide somewhere. There, yeah, you're going the right way now. Thank you. So, a recap. March 7th, the EASC directed that 2 readings of the amendment bylaw would occur. So the amendment bylaw is to move the uses that are ongoing on that site, which may be partly or somewhat legal non-conforming, into full conformity with the bylaw. However, the committee directed that a covenant should be prepared to deal with aesthetics and environmental issues, and once the covenant's ready, that a hearing be scheduled. In June of 2018, a draft covenant was finalized. The draft covenant required portions of the site to be hard surfaced and that a drainage collection system be installed to catch contaminants, as well as monitoring. On August 7th, 2019, the EASC was requested by the applicant to substitute a land improvement agreement in lieu of a covenant. The committee didn't change its position from the March 2018 resolution, meaning a covenant was still required. And then sometime during 2020, and maybe Nurez can speak to this if he has an opportunity to say a few things, the applicants decided to proceed with the site improvement work that would have been required under the proposed covenant. And following that, this year they requested that the application proceed to public hearing with no requirement for a covenant because the land improvements were completed during 2020. So that's kind of a quick summary of where we're at. So the question today before the committee is, are we going to still require a covenant or not? And if you can go to that next slide, please, Frank. Staff's recommendation is that we still require a covenant because there were 2 other elements to the covenant that was proposed that, in addition to the hard surfacing requirement and drainage collection, and they were in respect of the areas of land that are used for certain activities having to be on the hard surfaces. So having the ability through the covenant to regulate vehicle dismantling being limited to those hard surfaced areas that are then protected from accidental spills. And then secondly, that there is a monitoring recommendation built into the engineer's report, and that also was a proposed element of the covenant. And so we're of the opinion as staff that maintaining maintaining a covenant to give us these abilities which we wouldn't otherwise have under zoning is important. And then I've recommended a change to the directors for the hearing in the event that this recommendation is accepted. We just I thought it would be good to have representation from the south end and the west end of the regional district, as well as the area age director. I can't remember what I recommended last time. So that's my recommendation. I'll leave it at that. If there are any technical questions about process or the bylaw, I'll try to answer them. Neris Kara is here to answer questions or say a few words, and we'll pass it over to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for staff? Are there any questions for Mr. Kara, the applicant? Go ahead, Director Martman.
I just didn't know if the applicant had anything to say in advance. And then I'll have some things to say.
Mr. Kara?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Just want to say thanks to Mike and his team for moving this along. It's much appreciated. I think just a few things wanted to add. The areas we committed to the paving, we were on the previous planner that was managing this file had said if we committed to completing these proposed works, then the covenant requirement would be removed. Now, fast forward to where we are today, I understand where staff is coming from, and it's something we can live with. And just wanted to sort of reiterate that as part of our authorization with BC Ministry of Environment's vehicle dismantling recycling regulation, we have an environmental management plan which kind of covers all of those source control measures. All the cars that you saw in the picture in the presentation today, all those cars are depolluted. So all, as I mentioned in previous committee meetings, the batteries, mercury switches, if present, are removed. All the fluids are removed, and they're all vacuum extracted like you would see in a mechanic shop. And then those get emptied out by a reputable waste vendor such as TerraPure. And then, eventually those things get barged out to Duke Point and loaded on a barge, and then further down to our Tacoma facility for further shredding and processing, and then melted into different commodities. So essentially, it's people view these things as it's not aesthetically pleasing, but in our opinion, this isn't a waste. This is a commodity. It dovetails with the CVRD's Zero Waste Challenge initiative, which we've been, and this is what we do. In terms of the pavement, initially we had committed to paving about 11,000 square feet of the end-of-life vehicle storage area. We ended up paving 16,500 square feet. So I got those numbers around. That was for the non-ferrous area. For the ELV end-of-life vehicle area that Mike showed, initially we had proposed 20,000 square feet. We actually double that to 45,000 square feet. So just to let everybody know, we basically expanded our concrete impermeable surface footprint throughout the yard. And we just want to say thanks again for your time, and hoping to get this application to the public hearing stage, and once and for all to the zoning, getting it all approved, because we're coming close to 5 years. So thank you, Mike, and everyone else.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kara. I turn to Director Martman, and also Director Morrison has a question. Director Martman?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the applicant, for their patience. It has been a number of years, and I do appreciate that. I appreciate the applicant is also the operator there. But I just wanted to say that when you first look at all the documents, one of the things that strikes me, particularly coming from a paramedic world, is that when you see a lot of things put in place, you realize that there's a number of hazards that you're trying to adjust for. And so, yes, everything may be cleaned out, but there are hazards that are a concern. And the concern here is about land use on a vulnerable aquifer. And how much do the community really value this resource? And if we do value it, how do we protect it? And covenants are one tool, or one of our tools. And as much as I appreciate businesses, owners come and go, and operators come and go. And so what we are doing is ensuring that the requirements for protection are there for perpetuity. And I'm everybody here knows this, but I guess I'm wanting to say it because it's a key piece about moving forward to the public hearing. And if it's agreed to go to the public hearing, I do have a couple comments, because this is a real and I think the applicant may know this, but the community really needs to be heard because it's a very, very important issue. Water is used by our residents, by our farms, by our businesses, and by our elementary school. For those that don't know, that's where our water for our kids comes from rather. It's important to the community, and it was important even before the fire that was there in September of 2020. And it was really a wake-up call in the last week or so with the 40-degree plus weather about water. And so how much do we value the aquifer? Benjamin Franklin said, when the well is dry, we know the value of water. And so in due respect to the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin, I guess my perspective is we don't want to ever let this well go dry or get contaminated. And so there's a big concern. I think going to the public hearing, it will give the opportunity for the community to have their voice and to be heard in this process. So I stand by the recommendation of the staff.
You are moving the recommendation. Is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded. Director Morrison, go ahead, please. And Mr. Cara, would you like to respond as well? You had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So Director Hartman, we totally agree where you're coming from, but just wanted to reiterate that we've had, robust source control measures in place. We have a lot of neighbors within the area that also support our business. I mean, having said that, it's not, if this is what the recommendation is, we're happy to live with it. I just wanted to reemphasize that we went ahead and did what we did based on previous correspondence with the previous planner. But again, happy to move forward towards this. With respect to the public hearing, I hear all these concerns. There's other areas in near the aquifer that have underground tanks, such as the gas station down the street. And like I said, we've got our groundwater monitoring wells, that we can monitor on a regular basis, as part of the waste stream management license, which I believe is still on hold until this whole zoning amendment matter has been resolved. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have Director Wilson, then Morrison. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I am completely on side with Director Martman here because, as you all know, I'm dealing with exactly the same thing in my area in the protection of the aquifers. Without that, then and I understand that the applicant is doing everything he can, but that covenant and the public hearing is absolutely necessary because without that, you may find yourself in the same position as I am in a few years' time. Director
Morrison.
Thank you. So if I may ask a question of the applicant and then make a comment. So Mr. Cara, so am I to understand that you're comfortable with the recommended resolution in the package and that we register a covenant and that we go to public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm more than happy to support this. One of the things that I'm actually kind of interested in is that this is a very important site. This is a very important aquifer, and I know that we generally try not to write covenants and engage in regulatory behaviors that are trying to regulate the behaviors of people. We talk about land use and the uses on the land. And as the chair would know, even getting some folks to clean out their oil water separators on a regular basis can be a challenge. But we proceed and we do it anyways. And it sounds like there's a commitment from the applicant to do what's right here. And I'm actually quite pleased to hear that they increased the hard surfacing of the site so that there's a physical barrier between their operations and the aquifers. So I'll be supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call the question. All of those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Carr, and that will go to our next board, which is next week, next Wednesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, we turn now to R6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R6 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding application number 03H-16RS. No. Already did that one, didn't we?
Yeah, it should be on R7 now.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're on R7.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, so R7 should be a report on an application for SDC 2103 and SDC 2104. And so that's for R7 and R8. I got it now.
Thank you. Thank you.
R7 and R8, and I have both applicants
Okay.
in the lobby. So
Okay.
one at a time or together? One at a time.
One at a time. So R7, who was ever for
Is-
R7.
Colton Calip, and I will admit him.
And Thomas Roy, they're actually both for this application.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
So can
Thomas?
you see my
Yes.
screen? Okay, good.
Yes. Go ahead. Are they out of the lobby then? I can't see the
Yes.
screen. Okay.
Yep, it's Colton
Yes,
here.
Madam Chair.
You see my screen? Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, this is for both R7 and R8 for this presentation. I see that they're actually separate, but in this case, they're actually adjacent properties and the same applicant. So I thought I'd do the presentation together for these two. I also make note here that there is a new owner as of June 30th, but the applicant was the previous owner and still meets all the requirements of the bylaw. So this property is located on Shawnigan Lake in the south in Area B. It's a F1 zone. The northern portion of the property is 43 hectares, and they're proposing to deposit 140,137 cubic meters on this site. And this is just south of that. It's a 32 hectare property, and they're proposing is to put 151,761 cubic meters on this property. This screen shows the location and what the total deposit will be. And that's why there was, in order to avoid confusion, why I put the two together. This is a survey shows exactly what that deposit site was going to look like. And this was provided by the applicant. So on June 14th, I visited the site and took this picture to show you, to give you an idea where this deposit was going to go. Just to reiterate, both are type C permits. Again, it's about 140,000 on the north, 151 on the south, for a total deposit of 291,898 cubic meters. And the completion date is approximately, well, it would be December 2025. So in their report, they provided us with an environmental impact assessment and with included measures to minimize dust and soil transfer onto public roads, measures to control soil and sediment, as well as measures to control invasive species and noxious weeds. They've also provided us with quite a detailed environmental protection plan, and they have a QAP which is in the lobby, which is Cascadia Biological Services, and they've also enlisted RISIC for geotechnical for compliance and also for a schedule of monitoring. They also performed a groundwater impact assessment, and the recommendations are in the report, but also further on this one, we didn't actually ask for this, although we could have asked for this one. So this was actually added without us even asking for this particular report. Both applications were reviewed by our third party, who was Gandalf Consulting, and that was also included in the package that I provided. And just as a summary, again, they're both type C applications. The future use is agricultural. It's currently zoned F1. Proposed deposit is 291,898 cubic meters. This will be confirmed by a survey at the completion. The application is complete as per our soil bylaw number 4236. All requirements are met and has been reviewed by our third party consultant. So our recommendation is that this be issued, and we have Thomas Roy from Cascadia Biological Services and Colton Kalip from J.E. Anderson present.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. That was very thorough. And are there any questions for staff or the applicants? Director Acton. And this is I want to be clear, this is R7.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is around the future use, the agricultural use. And can we ask for, what is the plan around that? And can we also ask for that remediation plan?
Through you, Madam
Mr.
Chair, they've claimed that it would be agriculture use. I've been on site. I've also looked into through our council what we can and cannot ask from, and they're in doing what they've provided us. They're well within their right to, because we have a soil bylaw, to do what they're doing to deposit the soil.
Follow up, Director Acton?
So what does that agricultural use mean?
Mr. McDonald?
Through you, Madam Chair, they've just, all I've been provided with is that the goal is to flatten the property out and use it for agriculture use. I'm not sure beyond that. Perhaps the applicant can elaborate more on that.
Does the applicant have anything to add? Was that Mr. Roy, or who would be the applicant that would be able to answer about the agricultural?
I can answer that here. It's Colton Killip.
Okay.
So for agricultural uses, from what the applicant has told me, is he'd like to flatten out the land to be able to plant crops or easier access with equipment for agricultural uses.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, Director Acton?
Yes.
Go
So
ahead.
So if the end goal is agricultural uses, do we have a better understanding of what?
So for agricultural uses,
Somebody has their microphone on. Maybe you can turn that off.
Be able to plant crops or easier access with
I'm sorry.
for agricultural uses.
No, it's Mr. Roy's got his still on. Thank you.
If I could too, I would.
Yes, go ahead. Oh. Okay, where are we now? There was just a reverberation. I think it's gone. Go ahead, Director Acton. Can you repeat that, please? You're on mute now.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm just wondering, since it's stated that it's agricultural use, then do we understand the process? Like, is there no guideline or outcome that we should expect, or types of soil, or an end result?
I think it's gone. Go ahead, Director Acton. Can you repeat that, please? You're on mute now.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
I'm not sure what all that repeating echo is and who's causing that, but I can probably answer that question. There is no requirement in the bylaw, and I did get clarification through our council. They have provided everything that is required of them. I think that's the best way to put it in simplest forms.
Thank you. Okay, I'm turned to the director of the area. There's a recommendation here. Oh, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. I found Gandalf's report very helpful. And I am wondering, because there are some outstanding yellows in his table, which the yellow means may require additional clarification to be discussed. I am not clear how we have resolved these areas. And so I think I need to go through each of them and ask you those, if I may.
Where's Mr. Gandalf?
He's not present, Madam Chair. That's our consultant.
Oh, okay.
So we apparently, okay, so in our soil bylaw, so I'm understanding when I look at this table that the item that he lists are things that are required in our soil deposit bylaw. So we require a title search and so forth, and it says that we didn't get copies of easements, statutory right-of-ways, survey documents, and so forth. What is the status of that now?
Mr. McDonald, go ahead, please.
Yes, I've got that list in front of me, and I was anticipating a question like that. So So the first one that Director Nichols talked about was that the tidal well. We do have the covenant, and I know what the easement is. The covenant is, there's covenant on the north property about future building of and water supply for those buildings prior to building permit. And there's one easement on the south property, and that's actually a roadway that gets you onto the northern property. Other ones that were yellow, there was also on the survey plans, they had put 2 meter intervals, and we could ask for 0.5 meter, but if they put 0.5 meter on that, we probably wouldn't have been able to read it. It would have been all black. And even our consultant felt that, yeah, that was adequate, and it does say in the yellow. And just to clarify, before you see those yellow boxes at the far end of that report, there is also item present and adequate, and it's yes or no. And you'll notice if you go down there, that's a real quick read to say, oh yes, all things were covered. So our consultant did bring things to our attention. So, and we did cover most of these off, just so that there's a comfort there for directors, I guess. The next one was the on the contaminated salmon or contaminated site regulation. So this was saying if the soil was going to come from various locations. Well, I actually put this down as the chicken or the egg thing, because here the applicant has to get his permit. So does he know where his soil is coming from first, or does he know where he's going to get his application first? So in this case, this is something that we can verify after the fact. So again, that's why it was probably just yellow. The next thing on there was the soil. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could I just clarify? So you will require the applicant to provide information about where the soil is coming from as we go?
We have that option. We always have on all the sites. In this case, we're not sure if he's even figured out where it's going to come from because he didn't have a permit. But now, once he has his permit, he can go ahead and ask for or take soils from different sites. And this is always a requirement that we have, that if we want to know where the soil came from.
So it's always a requirement.
Follow up, Director Nicholson.
I just want to clarify that it's always a requirement for us.
It can be a requirement. We can ask if we are uncomfortable where it's coming from.
Okay.
Would you like me, just for clarity, would you like me to go through the last few of these items that are yellow? So the next one that came up was the soil assessment and deposit plan. So it was yellow, but what was noted is that the answers were actually embedded in other areas of the report. So even though Gandalf had stated there was no standalone soil assessment or deposit plan, throughout, and I read the report myself, it's quite a large report, and I did notice that I could find that information in various other places. So this is why we could have gone back and said, can you please clarify it all in one area? But we were confident we found it everywhere else in that report. The next item was the environmental protection plan. It said here, the environmental impact addendum will also state that effluent quality will be monitored if required to prevent suspended materials entering waterways or drainage streams downstream. So Mr. Roy is on with this, and he could talk to that, but I've just got a note here saying monitored if required. So that's why that was yellow. But if Mr. Roy would like to comment further, you're certainly welcome to do so at this point.
Mr. Roy, do you have anything to add? Director Nicholson, you have another question?
Well, I just want to follow up on those points. So I think if there was a soil deposit plan, then it would perhaps answer Director Acton's question about whether there is actually going to be topsoil put back on the site so that it would be useful for agriculture. And I'm also wondering about the monitoring that's going to happen and whether the information is going to be made available to the public.
Mr. Roy can answer the question. Well, actually, most of those questions you're asking, as far as the soil remediation plan, I believe that was in the report. But anyway, as the qualified environmental professional, I'm sure Mr. Roy will be able to comment on that.
Mr. Roy, go ahead, please.
I just got word that Thomas Roy's mic is not working on his computer.
Oh, okay. Is there anyone else that could answer that or help him out?
I mean, they can be seen in the reports that Thomas has put together. It's fairly clearly outlined.
It's in his report.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could address the last issue too and see if we can get his microphone working before the end.
Okay, I think, are you hearing me now?
Oh, there we go.
Yes, go ahead,
Okay,
please.
sorry about that, everyone. Major technical issues here today. Could you repeat the question?
Go ahead. Director Nicholson.
Oh, okay. So I have two questions. One question is around your soil deposit. Will there be topsoil put back on top at the end so that it actually could be used for agriculture? One question. Second question is, we're monitoring for water quality, and I was wondering if the information is going to be made available to the public, particularly those people who live in the neighborhood.
To your first question, in a lot of cases, the soil being deposited is of top quality, that is a proper growing medium. In that particular case, we wouldn't add any extra topsoil. We just have that as a growth medium. If it wasn't, there's enough good soil on the site that we can top the area so that we have a good growing medium. So yes, in some cases we will be adding a supplemental topsoil to it. In other cases we won't. We won't have to. In regards to water quality monitoring, we typically during the rainy season will do turbidity readings throughout the site. The downstream water bodies in this particular case are Van Horn Creek and Shawnigan Creek. So yeah, I mean, we take them down as notes. They aren't published per se, but they can be made available as far as turbidity, alkalinity, pH, all those standard readings that we do take.
Follow up, Director Nicholson.
Right, and there's one last yellow comment that I don't believe Mr. McDonald addressed, but it was about monitoring of the groundwater. And I'm wondering, and that's the one I was more interested in being available for the neighbors and how that was doing. It's a yellow thing. I'm not sure how you've dealt with that, Mr. McDonald.
Through you, Madam Chair. So again, they did this on their own, and they met the requirement of 12(2)(c) of the bylaw, and that there was a recommendation by a professional, which is McElhaney. So the expectation would be that they did follow up. We don't know what that monitoring looks like right now, but we would be looking for it in the future once they started depositing soil. So we would work with the applicant through that. All the criteria are met all the way through this.
Director Salmon has a question. I'll come back to you, Director Nicholson. Director Salmon.
Yeah,
And then Director
thank you.
Acton. And then back to Director Nicholson. Go ahead, Director Salmon.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't realize the ownership has recently changed. So can we know who that is and whether they have experience with soil deposit operations?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have the new owner's name in front of me, but I did get opinion on this. This application is through the previous owner and should be dealt with as with the previous owner, as he's fully compliant with the bylaw.
Go ahead, please.
Because I do have concerns about the groundwater monitoring, and I noticed that the consultant had said no timing or other information on the program is identified. So how do we get more information on that groundwater monitoring program, which is essential?
Through you, Madam Chair, the resolution could be amended to ask for that if you were to approve this application.
Okay, I turn to Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions, and I appreciate the questions around the groundwater monitoring, and I think that's important as well. And a real plan would be really helpful if there was clarity around what sites, where it's going to be monitored, and how often. I had a question about the deposit. What's the size of the deposit that's taken for these two sites, and when does it get returned?
So the two questions. The total deposit is just shy of 292,000 cubic meters, and I'm not.
Sorry, cash deposit, money deposit on for the permit.
That is at time of application. That includes the security deposit.
So how much
Is there a
is this,
follow-up, Director Acton?
how much is the security deposit? And is it double because there's 2 sites? And when do they get that back?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure what the exact amount was, as I wasn't the one that processed this. I believe it was $60,000 per site, but I may be incorrect. But it is the security deposit is by the size. So whatever the size of the deposit site would be per hectare, so it's 20,000 per hectare. So I'm going to guess that it was 3 hectares, and that's why it's 60,000. They don't get that back till 6 months after the remediation. And I'd like to go further on this because one of the questions did come up about the remediation part. This site, who's now sold it, but the previous site that he had, I actually visited that site, and it's one of the best remediated sites that I've come across. So we were quite confident with him in the job that he had done previously. So it was completely seeded, and there's grass everywhere and trees growing. And anyway, that's just for comment.
So my next question,
Just a second, Director Acton. Are you having, this is a follow-up? You're continuing?
Well, that was only one question. I think Mr. McDonald wasn't answering my question. So that was the one question around the deposit for the cash. My other my concern is, you showed us a picture from the site, but what does it look like towards the residential side? I'm concerned about that community being, how close that is, or what they have to look at, or screening, or what are the impacts to them?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't know what the distance is, but Colton from the surveyor is online, but it is quite a distance from that one slide that I showed. There's the Shawnigan Estates to the north, and I couldn't even see a residential house to the south, so I imagine it's quite a distance.
Mr. Killip, do you have a distance approximately for us?
Yes, I do have a distance. I'm just going to take that right now, and it's really far.
Okay.
I'm measuring it right now.
Okay.
.2 kilometers.
Thank you. So I can turn to Director Nicholson and then back to Director Salmon. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I want to follow up on this issue of monitoring again. So through you to Mr. McDonald, can we require, if we amend the motion to include requirement for monitoring, can we also require that it be made available to the public?
To you, Madam Chair, that requirement is currently not in our bylaw, so we could require the testing as per the recommendation, but that wouldn't likely be part of the recommendation to be made to the public.
Is there a follow-up, Director Nicholson?
Yeah, well, I think this is an important issue that people need to be, that we need to have some transparency around this kind of a project. And so we would receive that information. Can we make it available to the public?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a good question. I would probably have to research that. I'm not sure if there are any privacy issues involved with that.
Could I make a point here?
Who is that, Mr. Killip?
It's Mr. Roy Thomas.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Roy.
As part of our environmental, as part of our environmental protection plan, we do say that we are submitting monthly reports. The monthly reports will be dealing with any notes on slope stability, water quality, soil placement, any revegetation that has been completed, as well as replanting. So I don't quite know all the rules and regulations, but once I submit that, I'm not sure if that's a public document or not.
Thank you. I turn to Director Wilson. Director Wilson?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I take note of what Mr. McDonald says about the looking at the previous sites that this applicant has done remediation on, and I'm very encouraged by that. What does concern me, and I'm sure you all know about this, is the point that Director Nicholson has just brought up, and that is the monitoring which is being carried out. That's great if it's being monitored, but if those if those results are not going anywhere and nobody can see them, then that becomes an even more of a concern. Whether they're good results or bad results, they should be made available. And if we don't have that in our present bylaws, then with all due respect, that is going to affect how I move forward in my area as well. And I'm sorry to keep bringing up my area, but let's use my area as a template, because you know what's happening here and you don't want it to be happening in the areas that you've got there. So the only way forward to this is to get the results, get them published. Let's have pure transparency. Now, one of the things that was just said, that monthly reports are prepared. Where do they go to? Who reads them? Are they available to us? There's no point in writing a report if nobody's reading them. I would love to see these reports somewhere where I and other directors will have access to them. And privacy. This is our adversaries we're talking about. There should be no privacy. There should be transparency. Are the results good? Are they bad? Either way, we need to know. And I'd just like to know where those reports are going to and who's reading them.
Mr. McDonald?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Wilson, staff will be monitoring those, and then we've been monitoring them for compliance, because if they're out of compliance, we would shut the site down. So, and look for remediation immediately.
Follow up, please, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, please.
And if they were out of compliance, who would know about it? Would it be made public to us as area directors or to anyone else? And would we know that there has been non-compliance?
Through you, Madam Chair, if that was the direction that's given to staff, staff could provide that information.
I'm still confused here. So let's assume that it's out of compliance. Do you then go and shut them down and tell the area director, or does the area director have to come to you and say, are they still in compliance? So we got chicken and the egg here. How would I know? How would Director Nicholson know that there is non-compliance?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've never, yeah, through you, Madam Chair, similar to the other applications, we've not come forward when whether a building is out of compliance or soil is out of compliance. That's generally dealt with by staff.
Yeah, so
thank you.
Nobody
is there
knows.
A follow-up, Director Wilson?
Yeah, I'm still confused here. If there is non-compliance and we need transparency and and testing is being done, I don't
think
know.
Staff will be looking at that, and I'm sure you would find out from staff.
I sincerely hope so, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, and we turn now to, who did I have next? I didn't have anybody else. Oh, Director Salmon. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, we've got a new owner. It's injecting an element of uncertainty that I'm quite uncomfortable with. And
the application we're looking at is under the previous owner, I understand. So what we are to be speaking to is to the application that's in front of us. So that's what we are speaking to. So we can't make up anything else. This is the application that's in front of us. So that's what we have to go by.
Fine, but we're looking ahead. We know what the reality is. If there's a new owner, it's a new owner. So we don't have a track record, and the thoughts that what's happened with the previous owner and previous sites isn't actually relevant anymore. So the thing I'm uncomfortable with is just the uncertainty around the groundwater monitoring, the schedule, who does that, who gets to know about that. So I'd really like to refer this back to staff for more information on that specific groundwater monitoring, if I can get a seconder on that.
It's been seconded. On the referral motion, groundwater monitoring is the referral motion. Any comments on the referral? Director Morrison and then Director Martman.
So I'm looking at the report, and our consultant has ticked the box saying, yes, the program is present and adequate, and the no is in regards to the monitoring and the information being made available to staff. Staff have just indicated to us that they will be monitoring the results of that testing. It's not our job to monitor the and the results of the testing. It's staff's job. So, you know, if the question's been asked and answered, I seriously question what the rationale would be to send it back to staff when they've already given us the answer, other than to delay this going forward. So I won't be supporting the referral motion.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Kuhn?
Well, yes, as far as I'm concerned, the applicants have fulfilled all the requirements. What we're trying to do now is we're trying to get into more details, which really are up to staff. They're not up to us. And the question as to, well, there's a new owner, we don't zone owners, we zone properties. So it doesn't matter who the new owner is. That's totally immaterial. We're getting carried away into areas that really don't concern us. They concern staff.
Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree that the applicants have ticked all the boxes, and we have no right to deny anything going forward. But we do have the right to question some of the things which are going on here. And as for the comment that it's not our job to monitor the results, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not, but it is our job to protect our resources and our residents from any activities that may or may not affect them. And if that means that we need to look at those results, then so be it. But I will stand up for the residents and our resources that are below us and flowing through our lands right now.
Director Nicholson?
Yes, I support this referral motion because I think I need more information about the monitoring and whether the monitoring results, particularly the groundwater, can be made available to the public so that they can track it for transparency purposes. I would also add that I am a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that apparently a lot of our requirements are somewhat discretionary. The staff make a call on whether the applicant needs to do things or not. And because it's discretionary, I find it uncomfortable because we are providing a permit for an operation and not for a particular person who owns the business. So I think it's really important that it is fair with and done the same way for each applicant, not based on past record. And here we're in a position where we have apparently a really good applicant, but who has now sold it to someone else who may or may not be a great operator. So it's really important, I think, if we have requirements, that everyone has to meet those requirements. And yeah, and I would like more information on the monitoring.
Okay, Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. And you know, I listened to both sides or the different thoughts on this and ideas, and I do know that this has come up over and over again. We talk about these soil deposits, and I'm concerned that one day I will have it in my area, and I'll have it'll be closer to home. But the piece that I keep coming back to is that this is a permit, and I think about building permits. And do we ask who the builders are? Do we ask the nuts and bolts about which screws and which things are being put in place? And if we don't do it there, then why are we asking for it here? And maybe staff can say there's a difference between those two, but perhaps, and maybe that's my question to them, is there much difference, or is this simply a permit process? And if we're going to do something different, we need to get our processes changed or upgraded or adjusted. I'm not sure. So that's over to staff.
Through you, Madam Chair, through you, Madam Chair. I think the best way, rather than building permit, probably a development permit. I mean, it really is check boxes, and sometimes it can appear to be discretionary, but it's not. You really just have guidelines that we set out for all applicants, and when they check all the boxes, we have to issue the permit. And that's pretty much where this one's gotten. Again, even in that report about the groundwater assessment, if you look in the report, McElhaney did quite an elaborate report, and I'm just looking at it right now, and the table they provided, the estimated risk is low across their whole table. The consequences says low all across the table. there was only one thing that was talking about groundwater availability and the likely occurrence within 10 years. That's the one thing they talked about being high. So even in this case, again, it's not nothing we asked for. The applicant did it on their own. And again, the McElhaney did a really good report. And I think that if you amended the application, then we could just ask for the scheduling of what their testing would be. Maybe that would satisfy everybody.
Instead of referring this back, just add an amendment just to know when they do their testing.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we are currently on a referral motion back to staff. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is defeated. I turn back to the committee and maybe somebody will make an amendment. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
I was going to move the recommended resolution with the addition of the regular reporting be provided to staff and committee.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Been moved and seconded. I can call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now, R8, can we do the same thing?
So moved.
Second.
So you're moving the recommendation that's currently on there or with the amendment that we just finished passing?
With the amendment, Madam Chair, thank you.
And seconded
Okay.
with the amendment.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to R8. Or where am I? I don't know. Ms. Harrison, help me out. Yes. No, R9.
Yes,
Mr.
Madam
Dennison
Chair.
said I'm right.
Yes, Madam Chair. We
Thank
are
you.
on item R9, which is the report from the Water Management Division regarding the Cobble Hill Village sewer inclusion for Lot 6, Gallier Road. And there are 3 recommendations before you. Would you like me to read them?
Yeah, I think we can read them, and we've read it all at home too, and you could go ahead and read them, and I'm sure the director of the area will kindly approve it and move it, and we can carry on. Go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you, that it be recommended to the board, number 1, that the certificate of sufficiency confirming a sufficient petition for inclusion into the Cobble Hill Village sewer system service area for the property described as PID 008-080-755, Lot 6, Section 13, Range 6, Plan 1038, Shawnigan District be received. Number 2.
Moved by, whoops, sorry, oops, I'm moving right along, sorry. Go ahead.
Number 2, that CVRD bylaw number 4205, Cobble Hill Village Sewer System Service Establishment Bylaw 2018, be amended to include the property described as PID 008-080-755, Lot 6, Section 13, Range 6, Plan 1038, Shawnigan District. And number 3, that the amendment excuse me, to bylaw 4205 be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and upon payment of capacity connection fees be considered for adoption.
That's been moved by Director Wilson.
Madam Chair,
Seconded
it
by-
was with the greatest of pleasure and relief that I will move this one.
Okay, yeehaw. I thought that you wanted to speak to it too. Is there a seconder? No seconder? Hello? Oh, Director Smith, thank you so much. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. We move on now to R10.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R10 is a report from the Water Management Division regarding a budget amendment to the Cobble Hill Village Sewer Engineering Study. And there is a 2-part recommendation before you. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the 2021 budget for Function 812, which is the Cobble Hill Village Sewer, be amended to number 1, increase transfer from operational reserve by 20,000, and number 2, increase service of supply for consultants by 20,000.
Moved by Director Wilson.
Yeah, and I'd like to speak on that very briefly, if I could, as
Sure,
well.
if I
on some
get a
of the seconder.
seconder, it's been moved and seconded. Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Yeah, this one, Madam Chair, needs a little bit of explaining. At the moment, there are considerations being to extend some of the supply piping to the sewer system down in Cobble Hill to accommodate other businesses which are planned or proposed further towards the Rona area and Galliers Road. This study is to ascertain whether or not that sewer system has the capacity to take care of that, or whether we need to extend the capacity. I think I got that right, Mr. Dennison?
Madam Chair, our area director's got it right. That's
Okay.
essentially it. Also to look at the treatment plant as well, because that's a substantial extra flows, and we really want to be sure we're not generating odors. That's one of the big factors.
Really want to be sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Dennison.
Okay, so I'm going to call Director Martman. Go ahead, Director Martman.
Oh, I just want to say that anytime that Director Wilson wants to spend money on consultants, and I'm right behind him.
Okay, great, good to know. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of that? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you so much. We have one more. It's just R11. Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R11 is the report from the Inspections and Enforcement Division regarding Ticket Information Authorization Bylaw number 3209 amendments. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that CVRD Bylaw number 4390, Municipal Ticket Information Authorization Amendment, Schedule Changes, Bylaw 2021, be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any staff questions? Director Acton. Questions for staff? Director Acton, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always find the ticketing thing kind of interesting, and I always wonder why we don't use it more. So I guess I have a question. Have we ever used it for the soil bylaw? And I'm assuming 1,000 is the maximum?
Through you, Madam Chair, to answer the first question, yes, we have used it, and the maximum is $1,000.
And so would it be, which is, on all the fees, the ticket amount seems pretty insignificant. Have you considered just putting every infraction to 1,000?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've just left it what we thought was appropriate. We could revisit it. However, the tool has worked well for what it's useful. I think the biggest pain is if somebody has dumped something they shouldn't, and the remediation cost is quite high, and we do chase that down. So I think Mr. Warwick is also online. I believe we've used it twice, but it's once in recent memory I'm aware of.
Mr. Warwick, do you have anything to add? He might come on the screen later.
He might not be there. He might just have his.
Okay, I turn to Director Salmon.
Is it 1,000 per? Is it not per day?
It is 1,000 per day, but it's 1,000 per ticket.
But there could be tickets every day if need be.
There could be, but it's not likely after you hit them with the first one that they are going to be in not in compliance on the second.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Is that all the questions? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. We turn now to, that is R12 goes to the next electoral area. We have no unfinished business, no new business. We go straight to question period. So we come back at 4:19. Thank you. 5:30, do we have to wait for 5:30 or we can go directly into it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to start it, so I can start it. And then once this meeting is adjourned, then you can go right into it. We're live.
Thank you.
Live, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. So Ms. Harrison, do we have any questions for question period?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have none.
Okay, so then motion to adjourn. So moved and second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And what we do is we leave this meeting and join our one that we need to finish up, Special Electoral Area Services. Okay, see you there. Be there or be square.